Hi everyone, I'm Jared. I'm going to be talking to you today about my GMAT journey from a 555 to a 725 using Target Test Prep. So background about me, I originally attended Rutgers Business School where I studied finance, and I didn't really come across the GMAT until into my career. I work in medtech, in corporate finance, and I met some coworkers who, were planning to apply for an MBA, and they introduced me to everything from the GMAT to, applications and essays. Now, this was a couple years ago when I first decided that this was something I wanted to do, and I knew I wanted to start with studying for the GMAT. So once I knew I definitely wanted to go on this GMAT prep journey and try to apply for an MBA, I first just looked up, some free online resources. I studied for about a week, not much structure, just going over old math concepts and trying to, relearn some things I learned back in high school and college. But I thought I was, decent at that type of stuff. But on my first mock attempt, I got a 555. So that was pretty discouraging. I wasn't expecting to crush it, but I knew that I had a long journey ahead of me, and I knew that I needed some help. At that point, I had contacted some of my coworkers that were either, had done an MBA or were planning to, and I had two separate coworkers swear by Target Test Prep. They just said, the whole course guides you from start to finish, and I said, I definitely need something to boost to 555. I was not expecting where I ended up getting to, but that's kind of how I discovered Target Test Prep. So I finally decided to purchase Target Test Prep. I bought their 4-month course back in May to make round 1 applications. So a pretty tight time frame at the time. I didn't even know if I was definitely going to make applications in time or if I would have to do round 2. But I started by just thinking I'll fully focus on the GMAT prep and just see where I land. So I prepped for about 2 months with Target Test Prep. Ended up scoring a 655 on my first mock. So just 100-point increase from the first mock. No studying to using Target Test Prep. And then a couple more mocks, and I kind of plateaued around 675 is where I was scoring my mocks. But I thought that was decent, and I knew I could do a bit better. So I signed up for my first official attempt when I scored a 665. So they are accurate when they say, kind of where you're scoring in your mocks is probably where you'll end up scoring on your official attempt. And I wasn't happy with a 665. I wasn't too disappointed either. I knew there was room for improvement, and it was an okay score, a pretty decent score. But I was able to go back to the drawing board kind of and really use Target Test Prep to help me the rest of the way as well. So it took me 3 attempts to get to the 725. On my second attempt, I actually did worse than my first attempt. I got a 655, 1 point lower. And that was on me. I had thought that I knew as much as I was going to know. I had gone through the Target Test Prep course, but not everything. I had done some of the practice problems. I had gone through all the material, but I hadn't fully used the full extent of the course. But I thought I was in a good spot, and, I was doing, high 6s on my mocks. And so I thought, okay, maybe I'll just do a second attempt. But then after I did worse on the second attempt, that's when I was like, okay, I really need to dial in and actually do, what the course asks you to do, because something that Target Test Prep does really well is accountability, right? They kind of tell you what you need to do and how and when and how to do it to get there. I think that kind of separates that course versus, just trying to find your own online resources or however you do it. But on that third and final attempt, I was able to achieve a 725. So how did Target Test Prep get me to a 725, 170 point increase? Crazy to say or even think, I'd break it down into the three key components. I think for me, it's going to be a little bit different for everyone. But first and foremost is just the material itself. They have every single thing that could possibly be on the GMAT, they teach you. So from, probability to combinatorics, combinations, everything that you might have learned in high school or college, or you might not have learned, or you probably have forgotten, depending on when in your life you're taking the GMAT. They reteach it to you, and they teach it in a way that is very digestible. They show you the in-depth concepts of, really how you break down each problem and understand it. They also show you how to solve it relatively fast and any, tips and tricks you can use when on the test. I think the thing that Target Test Prep does the best versus, other resources or anything online is that accountability aspect, where it says, okay, it gives you your calendar. It says what you need to do each day. It gives you the amount of hours or what concepts you'll be learning that day. And I think it does it very well in terms of pacing, where I never really felt burned out, but I felt challenged, and I had the motivation to keep going. Even things as small as, the motivational quotes at the end of each chapter that they give you when you complete a chapter. Those little things, like they keep you going. And I think, Target Test Prep does a good job of keeping that fire lit under you in a way, so to say, where you really want it, So something I would advise for someone that is thinking of taking the GMAT, or soon or down the road, is start with Target Test Prep. I know, people might want to kind of go on their own, and they're like, I can do it myself. And some people might be able to, but I think starting early with the course, builds you up from a good foundation. Because if you, start, you might learn, you might not have the best test taking skills or studying skills, and you might build a weak foundation. And then if you try, building upon that, you might almost need to break down what bad habits that you've gained early on. But if you start with, the course, it is very fully comprehensive, where, I felt very rarely did I need to go outside the course to get outside knowledge of concepts or questions or anything like that. So I think starting with the course, and then it's, going at the pace that they provide you, but then you also feel comfortable with. So there might be times you say, okay, I want to do a little bit more, or I just, I don't have it all in me today. But I think staying with it, I of course hoped that on my first official attempt, I would get a 705 plus and crush it. And it didn't happen that way. It took me until my third attempt to do so. So I think that staying with it and really just trusting the course, I think is the way to go to get large increase in your score.